What if the happiest moment of your life, the one you thought would last forever, was stolen from you in the blink of an eye? Imagine you're standing at the altar, looking into the eyes of the person you believe is your soulmate. Everything seems perfect, until it isn't. Hours after saying, "I do," the woman you thought was embarking on a life filled with love, happiness, and endless possibilities, is found dead. But how did it all come to this? What happened between the vows and the silence that followed? This isn't a fairy tale gone wrong. No, this is a real, haunting story that will make you question everything about trust, love, and the darkness that can hide in plain sight. A woman posts her wedding video on TikTok, one final celebration of joy and love, and then vanishes, leaving only confusion, grief, and whispers of something far more sinister. The man she married seemed like the perfect partner, the kind of person everyone dreams of finding. But beneath the smiles, behind the carefully crafted words, a twisted truth was waiting to emerge. A story of manipulation, deception, and a love that might have been nothing more than a trap. What was it that turned this man's promise of forever into a deadly lie? And could anyone have seen it coming? Stick with me, as we explore the chilling details of a romance that seemed too perfect, and the chilling reality that followed. Trust me when I say, you won't be able to look at relationships the same way after this. This is a story you can't afford to miss. Before we continue, we would like to welcome you to our channel, True Crime Zone HQ. Thank you to all our viewers and a special shout out to our subscribers for your continued support. Together, we strive to improve and bring you daily updates on both told and untold true crime stories. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Tamara Ellis wasn't just another woman searching for love in a crowded world. She was someone who brought warmth and kindness wherever she went, a woman whose heart overflowed with dreams of one day finding the person who would share her life. Tamara's warmth wasn't just in her smile, it was in every gesture, in the way she cared for others. She was the type of person who put others first, always ready to lend a hand, to listen, to make those around her feel heard and understood. Yet, despite all her love for others, there was a void in her own heart that she couldn't fill. She had always longed for a love that would be just as deep and fulfilling. Tamara had a nurturing soul. She found joy in helping those around her. Whether it was supporting her friends or helping her family with their own lives, she was the kind of person everyone turned to. But behind that radiant smile and caring nature was a woman who had spent years alone. Tamara had watched as her friends and family found their love stories, one by one, while she remained on the sidelines, patiently waiting for her own moment to shine. It wasn't that Tamara lacked attention or affection. She was a beautiful woman, both inside and out. But love seemed to elude her, as if the universe had its own reasons for keeping her waiting. Tamara's story begins in Atlanta, Georgia, a city that never sleeps, full of opportunity and ambition, but also a place where dreams can be stifled by the fast-paced world that surrounds you. Atlanta was a vibrant city, a melting pot of cultures, businesses, and dreams. It was the city where people came to make their mark, to start fresh, to take risks. But in the whirlwind of everything that was happening around her, Tamara often felt a sense of isolation. She felt like just another face in the crowd, despite all the noise and activity. It was the kind of place that made you wonder whether anyone truly saw you, or if you were simply caught up in the rush. Born the youngest of 3 daughters, Tamara was raised in a modest home. Her parents, Denise and Harold, weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but they were rich in love and support. Her mother, Denise, worked as a school teacher, teaching Tamara the values of hard work, discipline, and the importance of community. Her father, Harold, was a mechanic who ran his own auto shop. He taught Tamara the value of independence, self-reliance, and the importance of having a trade or skill that could always be used to support yourself. While their life wasn't filled with material wealth, they had everything that truly mattered, a strong, close-knit family. Growing up in such an environment instilled in Tamara a deep sense of what it meant to care for others, to work for what you wanted, and to cherish the bonds that held a family together. But despite these solid foundations, Tamara found herself at a crossroads as she grew older. Her family, though supportive and loving, couldn't provide her with the one thing she truly yearned for, a partner who would stand by her side and build a life together. Tamara learned from an early age that love wasn't something handed to you. It wasn't something that just appeared when you wanted it most. Love, to her, had to be earned and nurtured. It was about finding someone who could truly appreciate all that you had to offer, someone who saw you for who you were, not just what you could give. Yet, despite all of her efforts, Tamara found herself constantly overlooked. She was always the bridesmaid, never the bride. She watched as friends and family members found their partners, got married, and started their families, while she was left standing on the sidelines, wondering when it would be her turn. As Tamara built her life and her career, the emotional scars of those lonely years began to weigh heavily on her. There were nights when the quiet of her apartment felt suffocating, when the ache of unfulfilled dreams settled heavily in her chest. She was proud of what she had built for herself. Her candle company, Ellis Essence, was thriving, growing quickly thanks to her attention to detail and the personal touch she gave every order. But, for all her business success, there was still an emptiness she couldn't escape. She wanted love, not just fleeting moments of affection, but real love, the kind that would build a future, the kind that would fill the empty spaces in her heart. And no matter how much success she had in business, the love she longed for seemed to remain just out of reach. Tamara's mind would often wander to the couples she saw around her, people who had found their someone. She couldn't help but wonder, why not me? Why hadn't she found the one who could make her feel complete? She had so much love to give, so many dreams to share, yet every time she tried, it felt like she was only met with disappointment. It seemed as though the world had conspired against her in that regard. The more she gave, the more she seemed to be overlooked, and the more she asked, the more her heart ached. There was always a lingering thought in the back of her mind, was there something wrong with her? Was she destined to live a life without the love she had always dreamed of? But, as fate would have it, Tamara's search for belonging and love was about to take a new turn. It was in this search, this quiet yearning for someone to finally see her, that Kendrick Rains entered her life. He appeared in Tamara's life like a breath of fresh air. His charm was undeniable, the kind of charisma that made him the center of attention wherever he went. There was something magnetic about him, something that made Tamara feel seen in a way she had never felt before. From the very first conversation, Kendrick made her feel special, cherished. The words he spoke seemed tailor-made to match everything she had ever longed to hear. His compliments weren't just about her appearance, they were about her soul. He admired her ambition, her kindness, her drive. With each passing day, Kendrick made her believe that she had finally found the love she had waited for. Before she knew it, their relationship moved quickly. What started as casual conversations turned into late-night talks that stretched well into the morning. Dates seemed to happen every other day, surprise dinners, weekend getaways, spontaneous gifts that made her heart flutter. It was as if Kendrick was trying to make up for every moment of loneliness Tamara had endured. Every second spent with him felt like a celebration of love. He made her feel like she was living in the pages of a romance novel, where every chapter brought a new and exciting twist. Tamara couldn't help but believe it was real. Kendrick was everything she had been waiting for. He was attentive, loving, and seemingly perfect in every way. He made her feel like she mattered, like her dreams, her ambitions, and her past were all things he wanted to embrace, not escape. In the whirlwind of their romance, it felt as though there was nothing but promise on the horizon. But deep down, as the days passed, something began to nag at Tamara. It wasn't something she could quite put her finger on, but it was there, lurking at the back of her mind. As Kendrick's presence in her life grew stronger, so did her unease. There were moments when she'd look at him and feel a strange discomfort, an unshakable sense that not everything was as it seemed. Kendrick had a way of hiding things, little details, things he would brush off as unimportant but that left her with an uncomfortable feeling. Kendrick was always so careful about the details of his life. His past was something he rarely spoke about, and when he did, it was always vague, like the stories had been rehearsed. Whenever Tamara asked him about his family, he would change the subject, quickly moving on to something else. He told her he didn't have close ties with his relatives. He'd even mentioned that his family had been a source of negativity in his life, and he had cut them off for his own peace of mind. His reasons sounded reasonable enough, but something about it didn't sit right with Tamara. Why would someone cut off their family completely? Was it really for peace, or was there something more to the story? And yet, Tamara dismissed it. She trusted Kendrick. She trusted the love he had shown her, the promises he had made. When Kendrick would look into her eyes, holding her hands, whispering sweet words about their future together, she couldn't help but believe him. Maybe she was just overthinking things, she told herself. Maybe it was just the result of her past disappointments, her past relationships that had never worked out. But even as their relationship continued to blossom, these small discrepancies grew harder to ignore. Kendrick's insistence on moving quickly began to make her uneasy. It wasn't just the grand gestures, the surprise dates, or the extravagant gifts. It was the fact that he wanted everything to happen so fast. There was no slow build, no time to truly get to know one another. It was as if he was pushing for an accelerated path toward marriage and a life together. It was the way he would speak about their future as if it was already set in stone, as if there was no other option but for them to be together. Tamara found herself questioning it, but each time she did, Kendrick would reassure her with a soft smile and words that calmed her worries. When you know, he would say. And every time, Tamara would let herself believe that maybe he was right. Maybe love wasn't meant to be slow. Maybe this was the love she had been waiting for, and it was supposed to feel this intense. But what she didn't realize was that the speed of their relationship wasn't an accident. It was a method, a manipulation. And then, there were the little things. Small actions that didn't seem to line up with the man she thought she had married. Kendrick had no friends, not the kind of close, personal friends that anyone might expect a man in his 30s to have. He was always vague when asked about his past. Sometimes, he would say things that didn't make sense. He told her he was a consultant, a self-made man, but he never mentioned specifics about his work. He had a number of different stories about where he had been and why he had left certain places, but nothing ever seemed to hold up when Tamara asked for details. How could someone who had so much to say about the future be so tight-lipped about the past? Tamara's mind started to race, but her heart pushed the doubts aside. She didn't want to be the woman who questioned everything, the woman who ruined something so perfect because she was afraid of being hurt again. She wanted to believe that this time, she was wrong, she wanted to believe that this time, love was real. But deep down, she could feel the tension in her chest, the unease building up like a storm just waiting to break. Have you ever ignored red flags because you wanted to believe in love? How many times have we all convinced ourselves that something didn't matter because we wanted the happiness we had been longing for? Sometimes, we let our hearts make decisions for us, and in doing so, we overlook the warning signs that should have been impossible to ignore. Let me know in the comments, have you ever ignored those signs, hoping for a happy ending despite your gut feeling telling you something was wrong? In the meantime, Tamara's heart told her to trust Kendrick. Despite everything that was nagging at her, despite every moment of doubt, she convinced herself that this love was different. And so, she continued forward, giving her trust and her heart to a man whose past she didn't fully understand and whose present left her with more questions than answers. But little did Tamara know, the truth was much more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. Everything changed the moment Tamara posted their wedding video on TikTok. For Tamara, it was a small moment of joy, something so innocent, her first real chance to show the world her happiness. The video captured the blissful moments of their wedding, the laughter, the excitement in the air, the vows they had just exchanged. To Tamara, it was the kind of memory she wanted to share with everyone. A celebration of her new life with Kendrick. She could already imagine the comments, the likes, the congratulatory messages flooding in. It was the kind of moment that confirmed everything she had believed about love, about trust, about the future. But what was meant to be a joyful celebration of their union quickly became the beginning of a nightmare. Within minutes of posting, the first comment arrived. Tamara scrolled through the replies, excited to see the outpouring of love from friends and family. But then, a strange comment caught her eye. Wait, isn't this the same guy who married someone else last year? Her heart skipped a beat. She scrolled back to the comment, her eyes narrowing as she reread the words. Could this be true? Was there something she had missed? The name on the comment was unfamiliar, but the question echoed in her mind. Was this the same man? She glanced back at the video, her excitement quickly replaced by confusion. And then another comment came. Isn't this the same guy tied to multiple missing persons cases? Her hands froze. Tamara's breath caught in her throat as her thumb hovered over her phone screen, her mind racing. It couldn't be. She had to be mistaken. Kendrick had been so perfect. He had promised her the world. There had to be a mistake, some sort of misunderstanding. But then another comment came in, and another, each more alarming than the last. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the messages, her mind struggling to catch up with what her eyes were reading. Y'all, I swear I've seen him with another woman before. Someone needs to check the missing persons reports. This man has been involved in several disappearances. Please look into it. Tamara's stomach twisted into a knot. Her mind screamed that it was impossible, that these were just baseless rumors, but the overwhelming flood of comments started to shake her confidence. What was happening? Why were these comments flooding her post, all about Kendrick? She began to feel a growing sense of dread gnawing at her insides. The excitement she had felt earlier quickly turned to anxiety. She couldn't stop scrolling. Each new comment was worse than the last. Her fingers shook as she clicked on the profiles of the people who had commented, hoping it was all just some cruel misunderstanding. But what she found next only deepened the sense of unease that had begun to settle over her. The first woman's profile had pictures of Kendrick, different women in each photo, but Kendrick's face never changed. There were wedding photos, posed shots of him with other women. Other weddings. Other women. All smiling beside Kendrick, their faces full of love, just like hers. Her throat went dry. Who were these women? What was happening? Tamara's heart pounded as she clicked through more photos. Each profile led to more unsettling details. Some of the women had faces she didn't recognize, but others had disappeared. News articles, missing persons reports, dates that lined up with Kendrick's own timeline. No one had seen these women in months, some even years. Her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. Was Kendrick involved in their disappearances? Had he done this before? How many times had he done this? The names and stories began to flood her mind, but her own thoughts were overwhelmed with a growing sense of horror. She scrolled faster now, unable to stop herself. Each photo, each comment, each message was like a blow to her gut. She could feel her hands trembling as she came to one horrifying realization: Kendrick wasn't the man she thought he was. He wasn't the loving, caring husband. He was hiding something much darker beneath the mask of charm and affection. He had done this before. To other women. He had used his charm, his smooth words, to manipulate and deceive, to lure women like her into his trap, and once they were in, they vanished. Tamara's mind raced as she scrolled through the endless string of comments, pictures, and articles. Her eyes darted from one post to another, trying to piece it all together. Kendrick had been married before, multiple times. And each wife, each woman, had vanished. There were headlines that read, "Local woman disappears after marrying mysterious man." Other stories of women who had been missing for weeks, months, no trace of them, no answers. And then, in every case, Kendrick Raines was the last man seen with them. Tamara's heart dropped to the floor. She felt a cold sweat on the back of her neck. She had been one of them, a victim in the making. All of this time, she had been falling for a lie. A man who had learned to manipulate, to charm, to win the trust of women like her. As her world crumbled, Tamara realized the horrifying truth. Kendrick had done this before. His victims had always been the same, vulnerable, trusting women, looking for love. He had used his charm and lies to weave a web of deceit, pulling women into his life, and then discarding them once they had served their purpose. It was the perfect game, and Kendrick had played it expertly, leaving no trace of his actions. No one had ever stopped him. But this time, it was different. This time, Tamara wouldn't go down without a fight. Her hands shook as she looked back at the phone screen, the weight of everything crashing down on her. She had to do something. She had to get out. But Kendrick was still beside her, completely unaware that Tamara had uncovered the truth. He still thought she believed in him. He still thought he had her fooled. Tamara's thoughts raced, adrenaline surging through her. She had to be careful, she couldn't make any moves that would tip him off. She had to act fast, and she had to be smart. The comments on her post had already alerted people. There were more eyes on Kendrick now. She could feel the walls closing in. The panic inside her rose. She wasn't safe, not anymore. Kendrick was no longer the man she married, he was a predator, and she was his next victim. But this time, she wouldn't let him win. Her heart raced as she realized the man she had married wasn't just a man, he was a predator. The weight of this truth hit Tamara like a ton of bricks, each detail she had uncovered crashing into her with overwhelming force. Everything she had thought she knew about Kendrick, everything she had believed in, was nothing more than an illusion. The man she had trusted with her heart, the man she had promised her future to, was nothing more than a manipulator, a monster in disguise. And now, he had already claimed his next victim, her. The panic that surged through her was suffocating, but Tamara knew that panicking was the one thing she couldn't afford to do. She had to remain calm. She had to act fast. But how could she move, how could she escape, when the very person who wanted to hurt her was sitting just a few feet away? As Kendrick moved around the room, seemingly unaware of the chaos inside Tamara's mind, she felt trapped. Trapped in her own home, trapped by the man who had once seemed so perfect. Her mind raced as she tried to plan her next move, but every instinct told her she couldn't trust him anymore. She couldn't stay here, but at the same time, any sudden move would raise his suspicion. She was walking a fine line, one wrong step and everything could fall apart. Tamara tried to keep her emotions in check, but the fear was consuming her. Her body was screaming to run, to get out of that room, to get away from Kendrick before it was too late. But her mind told her she needed to stay calm. She needed to be smart. With shaky hands, Tamara reached for her phone again, her fingers trembling as she glanced at the screen. The comments from the TikTok post were still there, still flooding in, and the weight of those words, the truth about Kendrick's past, made her stomach churn. She had to get help. She needed to find a way to alert someone, but she couldn't do it while Kendrick was watching her so closely. As Kendrick entered the room again, Tamara quickly shoved the phone back into her bag and forced a smile. She couldn't let him see her fear. She had to pretend everything was fine. In a last-ditch effort to keep the situation under control, Tamara made small talk with Kendrick, her voice shaking but steady enough for him not to notice. She spoke about trivial things, the weather, her plans for the weekend, hoping that by acting normal, she could delay what was coming. But it wasn't long before Tamara noticed the shift in Kendrick. His usual calm demeanor had started to change, and it was subtle, but it was there. There was a quiet menace to him now, a stillness in his movements that made her skin crawl. He wasn't acting like the man she had married. The charming facade was slipping. He was on edge, watching her closely as though trying to gauge her reaction. Tamara's heart pounded in her chest as she fought to keep her composure. The man who had promised her forever was now a stranger, someone she didn't even recognize. The realization hit her hard, he had been playing her all along. But there was no turning back now. She couldn't let him know that she knew. Kendrick moved closer, his eyes narrowing as he looked at her. "Are you okay?" His voice was soft, almost too soft, as if he was trying to read her. Tamara's mind screamed for her to lie, to act like everything was fine, but she could feel the tension building between them. She forced another smile, her body stiff with the effort of holding it together. "Yeah, I'm fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Kendrick didn't seem convinced. His eyes lingered on her for a moment too long, his expression unreadable. "You don't look fine," he said, his tone suddenly colder, his gaze sharp. There was no warmth in his words now, just suspicion. Tamara's heart raced faster. Her window of escape was closing. The calm, cool Kendrick she thought she knew was no longer there. This was the man behind the mask, the man who had used her to fulfill his twisted needs, and now, he was seeing her as nothing more than another pawn in his game. What would you have done in Tamara's place? Would you have trusted your instincts and run, or stayed calm and tried to play it safe? Tamara didn't have the luxury of waiting any longer. She had to act, and fast. Every second felt like a lifetime, every word Kendrick spoke echoing in her mind, telling her that he was already onto her. She had to get away, but she knew the risks. If she showed even a hint of panic, he would know. If she made a move too soon, he would stop her. The room felt smaller with each passing moment, and Tamara's thoughts were racing. She needed a plan, and she needed it now. But one thing was certain, she couldn't stay here any longer. The room felt suffocating. Kendrick was no longer the man she had married. He was someone else entirely, and Tamara's life was now in his hands. Every movement, every word, every second she spent in that room, felt like she was inching closer to the point of no return. And then, she made a decision. She couldn't wait any longer. By the time her best friend arrived to check on her, it was too late. Tamara was gone. Her friend had been trying to reach her for hours, calls, messages, but nothing was returned. It wasn't like Tamara to ignore her, especially after the frantic messages she had sent the night before. Something was wrong. It was unlike Tamara to disappear without a word, and her friend's heart sank as she felt the weight of that gut instinct, the kind of feeling that told you something was terribly wrong. Rushing to the hotel, she barely managed to catch her breath as she approached the receptionist. "I need to check on my friend," she said, voice trembling. "Tamara Ellis, room 214. The receptionist hesitated for a moment before making the call to hotel security, but it was clear, there was something in her friend's eyes that told her the situation was grave. The unease had already settled in, and as the hotel door was unlocked, reality set in. Inside, Tamara lay still on the bed. At first glance, it appeared as though she was simply sleeping. But as her friend approached, shaking her awake, a chilling realization hit her. Tamara wasn't asleep. She would never wake up. Tamara was gone, and in her place, only the cold silence remained. The room was neat, too neat. Everything appeared carefully arranged, almost as if someone had taken the time to put it all in place, creating an illusion of normalcy. But the stillness in the room, the way the sheets were tucked, betrayed the truth. There was no life left in Tamara. Kendrick had vanished. Just as quickly as he had entered her life, he disappeared from it entirely. There was no trace of him, no sign of struggle, just the utter emptiness left behind. The hotel's security footage revealed a man walking down the hallway at 3 a.m., carrying a duffel bag, looking calm, almost nonchalant, like nothing had happened. No rush, no panic. Just a man leaving as if it was any other night. In the days that followed, the investigation began. Law enforcement scoured the hotel for clues, looking for anything that could explain Tamara's death. But Kendrick was already gone. They searched for a trail, anything that might lead to him, but it was as if he had disappeared without a trace. The search was intense, but Kendrick was clever, too clever. He had done this before. The hunt for Kendrick began in earnest. Investigators pieced together his history of lies, manipulation, and the disturbing pattern of disappearances that followed him wherever he went. There were other women. Women who had vanished from different cities, with no one to connect the dots until now. Kendrick Rains had been a ghost, leaving behind broken lives and shattered families. But now, with Tamara's tragic death and her final post on TikTok, a post that exposed him to the world, law enforcement was finally beginning to close in. The search expanded across states, the trail growing warmer as the investigation revealed more details. Surveillance footage from bus stations, blurry images from gas stations, hotel records, all showed a man on the run, changing his identity as easily as he changed his location. Kendrick had been living a lie, but the truth was finally catching up with him. Tamara's final act, that innocent TikTok post, had unknowingly exposed him. It was the moment when everything changed, when the world saw the man behind the mask, and it had set the wheels of justice into motion. Her final moment, her desperate attempt to share her happiness with the world, had turned into the key evidence that would ultimately bring him down. But did Tamara's actions seal Kendrick's fate? Would she have survived if she had never posted that video? Would the truth have ever come to light? Or was it her vulnerability, her hope for love, that led her into his trap? As the investigation continued, authorities eventually tracked Kendrick down, but by the time they closed in on him, he had vanished once more, slipping into another identity. But they knew he couldn't hide forever. His face was everywhere, and people were watching. The net was tightening. Eventually, the long manhunt for Kendrick Rains ended in a small town in Texas, where he was finally apprehended in a low-budget motel under yet another fake name. He had been living on borrowed time, and when the front desk clerk recognized him from the news, she did what anyone in her position would do, she called the police. The justice that had eluded him for so long was finally within reach. He was arrested, and the charges against him mounted, not just for Tamara's death, but for the disappearances of other women, the countless lives he had destroyed over the years. His trial was a public spectacle, a chilling reminder of the danger that had lived among them for so long. Her final post, her tragic last act, had brought Kendrick to justice. In the end, Tamara's life may have been cut short, but she had left behind a trail that led authorities straight to the man who had fooled so many. Her story would not be forgotten. Do you think Kendrick could have gotten away with it forever? Or did Tamara's final act seal his fate? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, the weight of what had happened hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Kendrick Rains sat quietly at the defendant's table, his usual composure gone, replaced by an icy detachment. His face, once smooth and charming, now appeared cold, unreadable. He was no longer the man who had so easily won Tamara's trust, nor the charming figure who had woven a web of lies around several women before her. Now, he was a man facing the consequences of his actions, and the courtroom was waiting for answers. The trial was a highly publicized affair, and the evidence against Kendrick was overwhelming. Tamara's death was not an isolated incident. As the prosecution presented their case, they made it clear that Kendrick had been living a double life, one built on manipulation, deceit, and violence. He had used his charm to win the trust of women like Tamara, and once they were entranced by his promises of love and commitment, he would discard them when they had served their purpose. The prosecution laid out the grim pattern of Kendrick's previous marriages and relationships, revealing the chilling truth: he had done this before. Other women had disappeared under suspicious circumstances, and Kendrick had always been at the center of their lives, just as he had been with Tamara. The evidence was damning. Photographs, news articles, and testimony from experts painted a picture of a man who had carefully constructed a life built on lies, hiding behind a facade of charm and charisma. Investigators testified about the extensive research they had done, tracking Kendrick's movements across states, uncovering his various identities, and connecting him to several other women who had gone missing. Each piece of evidence brought the courtroom closer to the truth, and the sense of dread and disbelief in the room grew with every revelation. The emotional testimony from Tamara's family and friends further intensified the gravity of the case. Her mother, Denise, stood in front of the court, her voice trembling with grief as she spoke about the daughter she had lost. "Tamara was the light of our family," Denise said, her eyes red from crying. "She had so much to give, so much love. We never imagined that someone could take her from us like this. Tamara's sister, holding back tears, spoke of how much Tamara had longed for love and happiness. She deserved the world, her sister said, voice breaking. And Kendrick took that from her. He took everything from us. Then came the testimony from Tamara's best friend, who had tried to reach her on the night of her death. I had no idea what was happening, she said. When I couldn't get a hold of her, I knew something was wrong. But I never could have imagined it was him. No one knew. The friend's voice faltered as she spoke about their last conversation, remembering how Tamara had seemed happy, full of hope about her future with Kendrick. Each testimony was a sharp reminder of the life Tamara had once lived, a woman full of potential, dreams, and kindness, cut short by a man who had carefully manipulated his way into her life. It was clear that Tamara's death had not just affected her family, it had devastated her friends, her community, and those who had known her. But in her final act, her TikTok post, Tamara had exposed Kendrick for who he truly was, and in doing so, she had given the authorities the chance to finally stop him. As the prosecution wrapped up their case, the defense tried to shift the focus, casting doubt on Kendrick's intentions. They tried to paint him as a man who had been misunderstood, as if his charm and fast-moving relationships were simply the result of a misunderstood desire for love. But the defense's argument fell flat. The evidence was too strong, and the jury knew it. They weren't fooled by the attempt to paint Kendrick as anything but a predator. Finally, it was time for the jury to deliberate. The room fell silent as the jury took their seats, the gravity of their decision weighing heavily on their shoulders. They had seen the evidence, heard the testimonies, and now, they had to decide Kendrick's fate. After less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. Kendrick Raines was found guilty of all charges, including the murder of Tamara Ellis and the disappearance of several other women whose lives he had destroyed. Kendrick Raines was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in emotion as the verdict was read. Tamara's family and friends, though still grieving, found a measure of relief. This was the justice they had hoped for, the justice that had eluded them for so long. Tamara's mother, Denise, collapsed into her sister's arms as tears of relief and sorrow mixed together. "He won't hurt anyone else," she whispered, her voice filled with exhaustion. For the other families who had been affected by Kendrick's actions, there was a sense of closure. They could never get back the loved ones they had lost, but hearing the verdict brought a sense of justice that had been absent for so long. Kendrick had been stopped. He would no longer be able to manipulate, deceive, or murder without consequence. The final moments of the trial were gripping, as the courtroom slowly settled. The impact of Kendrick's actions still weighed heavily on everyone present. His charm, his deceit, it had worked for so long, and it had caused so much pain. But in the end, it was Tamara's courage, her decision to share her story, even in the face of danger, that brought him down. Her final post on TikTok, a moment of joy that had turned into a desperate plea for the world to see the truth, had exposed Kendrick for who he truly was. And because of that, justice had finally been served. But as the families of the victims left the courtroom, the question lingered in the air: do you think justice was served in this case? How do you feel about the way the trial unfolded? Tamara's tragic death is a haunting reminder that love, as powerful and beautiful as it is, can sometimes mask the darkest of intentions. Her story was one of hope. She wanted love, she wanted a life of happiness and connection. But Kendrick, the man she thought she would spend forever with, was not the man he appeared to be. He used her vulnerabilities against her, weaving a web of lies so intricate that even she couldn't see through it until it was too late. We all want to believe in the best in people, especially when we're given promises of love and commitment. But what Tamara's story teaches us is that sometimes, that desire for love can make us overlook the most glaring warning signs. It's so easy to convince ourselves that we're just being paranoid, that we're overthinking things, when in reality, those gut instincts, those little doubts, are the only things that can protect us. The truth is, Kendrick wasn't the only one who fooled Tamara. We've all been in situations where we've trusted someone more than we should have, or where we've ignored that small voice telling us that something isn't right. But Tamara's life, her tragedy, reminds us that we can't afford to ignore those feelings anymore. Trusting our instincts could be the very thing that keeps us safe. So, what would you have done if you were in Tamara's shoes? Would you have trusted your gut, even when the love seemed too good to be true? Would you have noticed the subtle signs, the inconsistencies, the things that just didn't add up? Or would you have, like so many of us, pushed those concerns aside in favor of a dream? Take a moment to think about it, because your experience could be the one that helps someone else see the red flags in their own life. Have you ever been in a situation where you ignored the warning signs because you didn't want to believe the truth? Or maybe, you did listen to those instincts and it made all the difference. Whatever your story is, share it in the comments below. Your words could be the lifeline someone needs to protect themselves. If you've been moved by Tamara's story and want to learn more about the dangers of manipulation, deception, and the dark truths that hide in the most unexpected places, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you never miss an update. We need to keep talking about these stories. Sharing them can help others recognize the warning signs and empower them to act before it's too late. And please, share this video. Send it to your friends, your family, your colleagues, anyone who might need to hear Tamara's story. The more we talk about these dangers, the harder it becomes for predators to hide. Knowledge is power, and the more we spread awareness, the safer we all become. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's make sure Tamara's story wasn't in vain. Stay safe. Stay aware. And remember, always trust your instincts. Sometimes, that inner voice will be the only thing standing between you and the truth.